Hey everybody, welcome. It's Sunday afternoon, March 13th. Going to do another installment of This Week in Regenerative News. Getting ready, doing this early afternoon, getting ready to finish the evening off with some basketball and the selection show that is the prelude to probably my favorite sporting week of the year. So definitely looking forward to that. But nevertheless, it's important that we continue pushing forward and staying engaged with stories and news and things like that, interesting things in the regenerative and biomedicine markets. So with that being said, I found two articles today, and I just posted on YouTube today, in fact, a video about cytokines. So I thought, well, let's reinforce some of those things we discussed, and I found a couple recent articles that I think were published this week talking about cytokines and just kind of reinforcing some of the principles and shedding even some more light on some of those things that I discussed in that video. So both these articles, I'm going to post them to our Facebook page. So if you're not a member there, zip over there and follow us, and you can read these articles. I think they'd be really beneficial. I think they'd reinforce a lot of good concepts. Facebook.com/stayregenerative is where we are at. So this first article, I'm a big horse guy. My daughter loves horses, and so I enjoy the equine world for the most part. So this group did this study. This group of veterinarians did this study. They wanted to identify, as horses are conditioned, as they're trained, what happens with respect to the levels of various pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory cytokines in the blood. Now, what they've noticed in the past, and this is true with humans as well, when we train, when we exercise, we generally induce somewhat of a pro-inflammatory state, and then it abates, and that's part of the conditioning process. As your cells start to change as a result of the physical stress that you're putting upon them. So you'll go pro-inflammatory for a little bit, and then you'll go anti-inflammatory. It'll up and down, up and down. That's part of the conditioning process. Now that changes between juveniles and adults. It's not quite the same reaction as we get older, as you might imagine. If you've ever worked out like I do, I don't work out every day, as you can probably tell. But when I work out, I imagine I'm probably in an inflammatory state for a little bit longer than somebody who's a little bit younger than I am. But what they found with these horses, they would exercise, and these are 2-year-old horses, is absolutely that happens when these horses are being trained. Large increases in pro-inflammatory cytokines, but also some anti-inflammatory cytokines are raised as well. And particularly, they found increases in those cytokines that typically, are seen in muscle tissue more frequently. So now they don't list exactly which cytokines they were searching for. Were they looking for some growth factors as well? As I mentioned earlier today, those definitions get played with a little bit of what a cytokine is and what it isn't. But it's definitely an interesting approach. And the goal of the study was to start generating information. So like equine trainers and equine veterinarians can be more in touch at the chemical level, at the biochemical level of the horse, so that they can give better care and optimize training regimens and rest regimens, things like that, to obviously improve the condition of the racehorse and achieve an optimal level of performance. So I found that article interesting. Again, that one will be posted on Facebook here shortly, so definitely check that out. It's definitely worth it. It's very short, worth a quick read. The second one I talked about in my video this morning about a cytokine storm, and I thought that it was relevant because obviously all the COVID stuff that's been going on for the last how many years now Cytokine storm is kind of a buzzword that we hear quite often. And so I wanted to learn a little bit more about it because I know the fundamentals of it, but it's I think I sold it short a little bit in that presentation. Go watch it. I talked about the cytokine storm largely with reference to the pulmonary system, and I think that's probably makes sense with a respiratory virus. That's pulmonary epithelium are going to be ripe for infection, and that's largely where some dangerous cytokine release can occur. But this article notes that cytokine storm is a systemic phenomenon as well. So you can get these cytokine, high localized concentrations of these cytokines in numerous tissues that can cause these inflammatory reactions throughout your body. So I did want to claim, just kind of shed some more light on that, because I didn't want you to think from my video that this only happens in the lungs. Obviously, it depends on what type of insult, whether it's a bacterial infection, a viral infection, can it be some sort of traumatic injury? Those all may have, different biological responses, but they could set up an environment for a cytokine storm to take place. But this is a really good article. I definitely want you to read this. It'll really reinforce everything I spoke about this morning about cytokines. But here I want to give you their definition of cytokine. And so they're right in this, right? The words, the prefix cyto means cell, right? Okay, we know that. And kine typically is associated with movement, kinetic, right? Kinetic. Kine is the prefix there. So they say cytokine means, or that these are proteins that result in cellular movement. And I think that's true to a point, especially when you're talking between just the immune cells. Because typically when cytokines, when a neutrophil or macrophage is talking to a T cell, it's going to inspire some sort of migratory event. And largely that's mediated, if you remember, one of the cytokine families was called a chemokine. And again, chemokines are attractants. So cells move up a gradient of increasing concentration of the chemokine. So the closer the chemokine is from the cell that released, it's going to have a higher concentration of chemokine there, and that's where the immune cell is going to migrate. Okay, so they've kind of tweaked that definition of cytokine, applied it to all cytokines. I think they're about half right there, and you're going to see as you study more and more about cytokines. I mean, if you're that into it like I am, you're going to find many different definitions of cytokines, and so forth. But I thought that was a very relevant article. It's a nice, simple, easy to read, well laid out review of cytokines for anybody to read and easily internalize that information and find the requisite meaning therein. So definitely check that out. I'm going to post that right now to Facebook. You guys have a great week. I'm looking forward to it myself. We've got some new content we'll be working on this week, so hopefully in the next 3 or 4 days we'll be churning out some new beneficial information in some interesting topical categories. Take care. Stay regenerative, my friends.